What do you think are the main challenges in your new role?
I think we've got to deal with the security situation where a minority of people seem intent on dragging people back to the Troubles. And I don't know how we can influence them. I've been talking to a lot of people about this, because you talk about the future, you talk about a really vibrant Northern Ireland and Belfast. You can talk about how the PSNI are impartial, and the things that happened 30 years ago are not happening today. It's a very different organisation. But somehow, some of these people seem to think they're fighting a war, and that's just simply untrue. There's no war going on here. We're the impartial police service. And the sad thing is, the really sad thing is, if they or their family were involved in a road traffic accident and stopped breathing, the very first people that would be doing mouth to mouth would be the PSNI colleagues that turned up. So we've got to persuade people that that is not the right way. And for those that can't be persuaded, sadly, they've got to be locked up. So that's the further security situation. I think making policing more personal, so that people really do have their local police officers who they know the name of and can trust and can speak to. That's not just a vision of policing. We can do that, and we will be doing that. And I think the third thing is we're entering into a recession. I think Gordon Brown committed to halving the debt in 4 years. I think it's going to get a bit tough financially. So we have to get better and better at how we use our cars, our money, how we spend money on petrol, the equipment. We've got to save money, make sure we've got the right people in the right place. And that's going to be quite tough, because doing that after a period of time when we've had money and suddenly having to find it from somewhere else is a tough thing to do. So we're going to have to be more business-like in what we do. But I'm really optimistic. I've got some great people here. We've got some great support from people in Northern Ireland. And I think the PSNI is going to be the finest in the world in a very short space of time.
It's in relation to that question I just asked you. Back in June, Public Achievement presented a video to the policing board about the views of the young people. The majority of them were quite negative. Do you, as the new Chief Constable, have any plans to make the relationship between young people and the police easier? It's not as bad one, we always think they're bad, or vice versa, if you know what I mean?
I think often the view of young people is shaped by what we read and see in the media. And we've got a lot of work to do, I think, still with media about presenting policing in a very balanced way. Because often it's the headlines of the Christmas lights. It's a picture of a few young people rioting and then police officers having to deal with that in riot gear. That's the image of police. That's a tiny, tiny bit of what we do. Most of what we do is absolutely about being personal, helping people. So we've got to try and get that across in a better way. I think community policing will do that. Young people get to know policing better because they'll know who their police officers are. And the other thing we can do is the schools have a greater conversation. We have an independent advisory group already for young people, and I'd like to see that develop more and more. Some of the ideas around young people's policing partnership would be an excellent idea to take that forward, so I'd be fully supportive of that.
You said that dissident Republicans would be your main concern. It appears recently there have been a larger amount of young people being recruited to these organisations. What would be your opinions on this, and why would you say that these young people are joining?
I don't think the numbers of young people being attracted to it are as large as people might be concerned about. But in some neighbourhoods, I think where there's been a history over many years of people seeing themselves being oppressed or vulnerable for whatever reason, I think it's very easy to create a story where taking on the police or doing things appears somehow attractive. So we've got to do two things. Firstly, we've got to be in those neighbourhoods in a very personal way, as human beings doing the right things to persuade people that we're not the enemy. And I think secondly, there's a bigger dialogue that's got to take place politically about the future young people. And opportunities have got to be created for young people to come out of their neighbourhoods and see what the world looks like across the other side of the street, or because a lot of people that do these things, they only ever see it within their own neighbourhood. When I was in London several years ago, we took 1,000 young people off the most difficult estates in London, where we were having 300 robberies a month committed. That's a lot of robbery. And we took some away, and a lot of them hadn't even been 3 miles up the road in their entire life. So they had no concept of what the world was like outside of the streets where they lived. So I think we've got to get something about movement of young people around. And I think, even schools becoming more integrated might not be a bad thing, because people get to talk to each other and realise that we're all human beings. I am concerned about it. I do think some young people, and in minority, there's an excitement, particularly during the parades, in somehow grabbing a petrol bomb and chucking it. There's a sort of adrenaline thing about that. But the people that deal with that are the communities themselves. I'd rather the police weren't there, to be quite frank. I'd rather that the communities themselves stopped it happening in the families.
You said that when you were in London, there was a programme taking young people away. Do you have any plans to possibly duplicate that into some communities in Northern Ireland?
And I've already been speaking. I don't think that's something that the police can do on their own. It's got to be run by local people for local people. What we can do is we can support it. And I've had some really good conversations with people already just in 2 months about how we might help young people to develop leadership. I know my own children had the huge privilege of going, for example, to work in underprivileged parts of Africa as part of their gap years growing up. And that made their eyes change about poverty, about what life was really about. They learned a lot about themselves from doing that. And I think I'd like to see whether we can expand that, particularly for young people who are, who have never seen the world and beyond their own neighbourhood. That would be a brilliant thing to do. So I'm encouraging that as much as possible. And I've been speaking to people about how that might happen.
Thanks very much for the interview.
Thank you very much. It was a real pleasure. Thank you. Great pleasure. Thank you. Lovely to see you both.
Thank you.
Pleasure. Thank you.